let me first and foremost introduce Omid Rahmat. He's Executive Vice President for John Peddie Research. You know, I don't know if everyone sees the squares in exactly the same order. So when I call your name, just raise your hand so we know who we're talking about. So Omid, raise your hand so everyone sees who you are. Fantastic. Then we've got Phil Eisler. He's Vice President and General Manager of Nvidia Geforce Now. Bruce Grove. Oh, great, fantastic. Vice President GM of Mythical Games. Tamar Shoham. Okay, CTO of Beamr. And of course, Wanda Meloni, a CEO of M2 Insights. So this is going to be a fun panel. Omid, you're going to take it away. I'm going to mute. I'm going to enjoy this. So.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Neil. I thought I'd just start because we don't have a lot of time, but maybe if I just go through everybody and you can just give a little background, and we'll start with Phil first, and then I'll go through everybody in the list.
Hi, I'm Phil Eisler. I'm VP and General Manager of Cloud Gaming here at NVIDIA. I've been here about 10 years, and then I spent some time at AMD and ATI before that, so a long time in the graphics industry. And I play video games all day.
Thank you. Bruce?
Hi, everyone. I'm Bruce Grove. I'm VP and GM for Mythical Games. I was acquired last year, and the entire team Polystream, where we'd been building an alternative way to do cloud gaming for the previous 5-6 years. And prior to that, I was very much early into cloud gaming with OnLive. I was the first head of engineering at OnLive, and all through that journey. So I've been in this for a while now.
Thank you. Tamar?
Hi, so I'm Tamar Shoham, the CTO at Beamr. We do perceptually driven optimization of image and video and high density efficient video encoding. And I'm excited to be here with everyone today.
And Wanda.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I'm Wanda Meloni. I'm with M2 Insights. We are market analysts and consultants tracking digital content creators. We've been tracking 3D graphics, content creators, and game creators for about 20 years.
Thank you. So I'd like to at least ask everybody one question each, and then we'll sort of go from there and see how the time's working out. So I'd like to start with Phil. And one thing that's really interesting is that NVIDIA obviously produces products for all kinds of devices, but you're also now with NVIDIA Geforce Now, you know, powerhouse in cloud gaming. So what drove that decision, and what's driving people choosing a cloud gaming platform?
Well, I think at NVIDIA, we believe that cloud gaming will be the future of gaming, and gaming is an important part of NVIDIA's roots and our company. I mean, it's over half our company still to this day. And we just saw the opportunity for people to play remotely. And we saw the benefits of the convenience of cloud gaming, access to your games online, not having to download them or update them, and the ability to upgrade any platform to the GeForce gaming experience. Modern video games evolve rapidly and need constant upgrading of your GPU, and we thought that in the future it'd be so much easier just to upgrade your device from the cloud. We started out focusing very much on PC gaming experience, moving that to the cloud. You know, what we know and well from GeForce land. And most of our initial customers were playing on PCs and other kind of desktop devices with the keyboard and mouse like a Mac and eventually Chromebooks. We've sort of branched out recently more into mobile devices. And so that was a little more challenging in terms of scaling them down and supporting touchscreen inputs. And now branching up a little bit into TV displays. So from kind of 6-inch displays up to 60-inch displays. And each has been a bit of a journey. But we keep optimizing things and attracting more and more gamers to the convenience and the performance of cloud gaming.
Thank you. Bruce, your former company, as you said, Polystream, was acquired by Mythical Games, and you have an alternative approach to cloud gaming. Maybe you can sort of share with us what that is.
Yeah, so like Phil, I been on this sort of journey and roller coaster for cloud gaming for a long time. And one of the things that we looked at was we were trying to solve multiple problems. So some of it was scalability, some of it was cost to serve the users, but some of it was also sort of very much where TIFCA came from, was the orchestration of the compute. We've heard a lot today about, we were talking earlier about edge, composable compute, where the resources are. Phil just mentioned how do we stream to lots of different devices. And so for Polystream, our approach was actually run the game in the cloud, but render locally. And that allowed us to break apart a number of pieces of the compute. So as we look at the devices, and actually Nvidia is a great example, right? They have huge presence with GPUs in consumer devices everywhere. So leveraging that while still leveraging the power of the cloud for running the games. And then that lends it to what else are we looking at, right? We talk a lot about AI and machine learning, and where else are we using GPUs? And so it's GPUs are in the cloud and they're incredibly powerful, and we're using them for certain parts of the games and the game performance. But for us, it was about abstracting those pieces, which in turn allows us also to make use of edge compute and also sort of more optimized of how we stream the commands across the network. So it's a very different approach. And like all of these things, pros and cons, there's always gives and takes on those, but something that we feel falls more in where we're going with the distribution of compute from our local devices to our edge, all the way back to the core of the data center and across all of our different networks as well.
You're on mute, Omid.
You're on mute, Omid.
Tamar, sorry. I was going to say, you said something very interesting about video streaming or streaming in general being an equalizer in sort of remote work and play. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that. You know, we sort of see it as sort of haves and have not situation, but you have a different viewpoint.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that at Beamr, I heard throughout the different presentations how COVID was an accelerant for remote work, but we actually believed in remote work from day one. Over a decade ago, we worked in a hybrid mode where many of us were remote workers all along. And I really see it like when we try and address the problem of diversity in our professional field, be it diversity of different socioeconomic groups or diversity of different genders, I think enabling remote work really allows equalization. And I mean, Neil brought a great example in his introduction of Tim being a single father, and the issue of removing the need to commute, removing the need to be in a specific geographic location, and enabling a whole additional sector of potential brain power to join the workforce by providing options for remote work. I think that's a really important tool or equalizer.
Well, that actually leads nicely to, you know, what I was going to ask you, Wanda, which is about live streaming and cloud gaming are very social experiences. I mean, I've got teenagers and they're very unsocial, but they're social on, you know, game playing and streaming and all the other things that go on. So the cultural impact of gaming, and maybe you can talk a little bit about, do you see this as being something, first of all, replaces traditional gaming? And then what does it mean sort of in a cultural sense?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, replacing traditional gaming, I wouldn't say that. I think it extends and expands the experience more than anything, and it just really allows for gamers to be able to access what they're doing on multiple devices, multiple locations. You know, it's more, where do we go from here in terms of the cloud gaming, from extending it to something that's even more social when you include, you know, more numbers of people. How does that look like? And from a social perspective, how does a teenager engage, because the engagement may be different.
Well, that's another point I think I wanted to ask Phil about was, and it kind of ties into that as well, is that, you're with cloud gaming, you're going to support a lot of different types of client devices. Those experiences are kind of different to what you're used to and what control you have. So I would imagine the same experience that you would get on a laptop or a PC is going to be the same experience you want to have to a certain extent on a phone. And we've talked about networking issues and all these other things. So what can you do to sort of make that possible? What adjustments do you have to make those games enjoyable?
Yeah, I mean, we've had to work harder at the mobile experience, as I mentioned, because we're starting from a base of PC games, which are kind of designed for 12 to 24-inch screens, and so scrunching them down to 6-inch screens is definitely a challenge. So we've had to work with our publishing partners on scalability. But even more difficult is moving from a keyboard and mouse input to touchscreen inputs. We can start with a gamepad type input, which we do on the TVs, and a lot of PC games do support gamepads. But there's really far too many buttons on a gamepad remote to map to touchscreen. So it really has to be authored in the game itself. We have managed to do that with a couple of gaming partners, most notably Epic on Fortnite and MiHoYo on Genshin Impact. It turns out when they develop the mobile version of their game, they do it on the PC version of the game, because most game development is done on a PC. And so they were able to sort of turn on those paths and basically put in the overlay with the convenient touch buttons. There's a whole bunch of keep away zones on a mobile phone. There's a lot of small details and finish in terms of, the camera cutouts and stuff like that. You don't want buttons mapped over that. And there's millions of models of phones. And so it's quite a chore, but done right, we found it to be quite a natural experience for people to play. And the younger people really adapt to playing games on a phone, I think, more quickly than us older gamers, perhaps. And so it seems second nature for them to use their fingers and engage on their phone. And I find with my children, they're increasingly spending more time gaming on their phone than even the PCs that they have available to them. So we think that's an important place to reach them, and they do enjoy that kind of uploading to a sort of Geforce kind of PC gaming experience.
Cool. Well, I mean, Bruce, one thing that's really kind of interesting here, and maybe there is a tie-in as well, is that you obviously are looking at the importance of Web3 and blockchain technologies in gaming. And it'd be interesting to get your perspective on that, and particularly in terms of how it's going to shape the way that we do actually do remote work and play, because there is a tie-in overall, right? It sort of goes into the fabric of some of your experiences on the web.
Yeah, and so Mythical's a Web3 company. It's built on the idea of games having ownership and starting from sort of a very different premise. And we've got games that are out there at the moment. We've got more games that are coming. It's very much driven by also more of the social experiences and other of the aspects of where we see this. And one of the things that I think that for the longest time cloud gaming has done has mostly focused on, here's a game, can we put it in the cloud, right? Whether it is taking PC game and refactoring it for another client, or taking an Xbox game, running it on a remote Xbox and streaming to an Xbox, right? We're sort of repeating a lot of the compute. And one of the things that we want to shift there is when we start thinking and talking about Web3, Web3 is more than just blockchain. It's more than just NFTs, right? It's accessibility, it's immersive 3D, it's semantic web, and all of these other parts that are coming together. And that leads to what are these next generation of experiences going to be? And Wanda just touched on something that I think a lot about, which is a lot of our gaming experiences and a lot of the experiences that have been translated into things like virtual concerts are still built on this idea of small numbers of players in a shard. Now they get served a concert and it's still a small number of people in that experience. Well, what happens if we want to build those much larger experiences? How do we see more of the sorts of experiences like Improbable did with Other Side? We put 5,000 people into an experience. That has a massive shift on how users behave, how people experience it internally in a virtual world. And I think there is a new generation. We see this, right? We see that people they use Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite. It's a social world for them. It's a place they hang out. It's a place to go. So we're creating these greater and greater experiences for people to really go into and enjoy. And how do they become bigger? And how will we experience them? What does a Web3 world feel like with 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 people in it? And I think that's the direction. So for me, I think what is important here is this next set of experiences we are building for the cloud. They are cloud native. The cloud gaming piece makes them accessible. It makes them instant. It makes it easy to move from one experience to the next to the next. Now, how do we connect them? How do we move in and out of them? How do we travel with our identity between them? All of these are the things that we are only just beginning to touch on. And they're absolutely critical to what these experiences are going to feel like. What does it feel like in a 2D world today? We go from a game to a web page to our email to all of these other things, social websites. But we can still carry our identity with us. Well, what does that feel like in 3D immersive worlds as we move between work, play, collaborative spaces, all just jumping around them? And that means we've got to start thinking about designing the content for that compute, for that experience. And so that's much different, I think, to where we are with taking the games and putting them in the cloud. Now we need the content creators to think about what are they going to build? How are we going to experience it? And we're kind of starting an entirely new genre of what these games and experiences will be. And we're right at the beginning of it, because we've never really built a lot of these kinds of things before. And that's where I think I spend most of my time thinking about cloud gaming, creating cloud native experiences.
Excellent. Samsung has a gaming hub on their TVs, and we know that a lot of the TV vendors actually include streaming services. And now we're seeing that the streaming services are interested in gaming, that, you know, there are companies that are actually putting gaming services streaming on their TVs, you know. So maybe, Tamar, you can give us a little bit of perspective on that. I mean, should we expect that to be something that's adopted widely? Are there technical challenges that we have to overcome first? What's your opinion on that?
So in a way, when we look at streaming services or cloud gaming that is streamed online, it's a very multi-layer operation, going from, I guess, the points, Bruce, you just touched on the experience and the identity, which is like the highest level, through the packaging and the DRM and all of that, and down to the very core, the essence that enables this technology, which is the video codec at the very bottom. So when we're looking at challenges like cloud gaming, we have specific challenges which are related to very low latency, so that there is good responsiveness. But basically, Tom made a comment before, which I could totally relate to, on how our industry likes to keep things forever. So that's definitely true for when we're going in depth to the bottom layer of the video, the elementary stream. We have a standard AVC H.264, which is 20 years old, and it's still ruling the streaming of cloud gaming, you know, the most sophisticated applications. We're very slow in adopting new standards. We are seeing adoption of HEVC and AV1 that will enable specifically, I mean, we spoke a lot before about remote desktop and additional tools that we need for remote collaboration and remote work and remote play. So the newer codecs being HEVC, AV1, VVC, which has already been ratified, but is still a while off from actually being used, are going to make reaching that pinnacle of best quality at lowest bit rate, at lowest compute cost possible. It's going to take us further. But because the industry is indeed such a slow adopter, when you look inside and dig deep, most of it is still AVC.
Yeah, I agree with you. But, you know, you've all talked about the content and the experience. And obviously, you know, Wanda, the question that I'd have from your perspective, because you do have some insight into this, is from the point of view of the game developers, you know, what do you see as their strategic imperatives, and what do you see as in terms of what they're doing to enable this remote play, and how do they feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing I love about game developers is that they are like always the first to adopt, right? They're the first to adopt any new technology. So, so given that, I mean, I would say, Bruce, like with OnLive, and you know, they jump in, they adopt all the greatest technologies, and then, you know, then we've had these hiccups over the course of a number of years, and so I think they are a little bit more tentative. There are some that are fully like jumping into the metaverse, for example, and you know, that's something that Bruce's company is working on. And I think, you know, I think what a lot of the developers are looking at now in terms of from a cloud perspective is looking at it from a back end, if we want to just say from a development standpoint, sort of software as a service, like really making sure that everything is set up in the cloud to do all of the back end implementation that they need. And the tools for that is what we're seeing developing right now for all that back end. You know, I think, sorry, that's my dog. I think going back to the streaming, you know, one thing I did want to touch on too is that, you know, Netflix is kind of an interesting sort of cross between where this is going as well. You know, Reed Hastings, the CEO, had said several years ago that they see their competition as Fortnite and Epic, right? Not other cable channels or streaming channels, but looking at you know, the eyeballs of those young game developers. And they've, you know, just last week they announced their 5th acquisition of a game studio. They are also their studio. They opened a studio up in LA, and they're doing a AAA development. Most of the studios are focused on mobile, but the new studio in LA is focused on a AAA title that is yet to be launched. So I think what we're seeing is like this coming together of multiple industries. And I think we're going to see new tools. We're going to see new developers. I mean, you look at Roblox, for example, and I know it's crazy to think about, but last year, Roblox paid out to their developer community $500 million for payments for what their developers made. And you compare that with Autodesk and their media and entertainment group, which made about $218 million last year total. So what I think we're going to see is more tools that are very accessible to these new creator economy, if you want to call it, of game developers.
I'd rather not call it the creative economy. It's a good word. Let's talk about 5G, because I think there's a lot of expectation that, you know, 5G is going to change the world. Apparently, I have 5G on my phone, but it looks a lot and feels a lot like 3G. So what do you think about 5G? I mean, this is kind of an open-ended question. You know, you may have relationships with some of the people providing 5G and not want to damage it, but is 5G really going to change things? Is it going to be the one that's going to enable a fully functional streaming utopia?
I mean, we've tested it quite a bit with Geforce now, and we do see it as a big step up for cloud gaming. I mean, I think if you're playing on a mobile device today and you're not on 5G, you pretty much have to use Wi-Fi. I mean, 4G just is not very good in terms of latency and packet loss to have a decent cloud gaming session. And so we're seeing a big step up in the bandwidth and the quality of the network to enable remote cloud gaming on mobile devices. Now, people have been home quite a bit because of the pandemic, so they've been playing on Wi-Fi on their mobile devices. And so to me, 5G is like Wi-Fi performance anywhere. And so it'll enable you to play remotely and while moving. So, if you're on the bus and interestingly, lately this year, we've had a surge of auto companies interested in Geforce now in cars, because people want to, especially with autonomous vehicles coming, people need to be entertained now while they're traveling. So 5G is really, I think, the only solution for cloud gaming if you're moving across the highway. So I think it still has good potential for the future and is a great asset for cloud gaming.
It'll be interesting to see people playing, Grand Theft Auto and driving at the same time. That's going to be.
I'm just going to counter that one slightly. Not because I don't think 5G is great, but I think 5G is not very well tested yet. And I think that's kind of your point, Omid. At the moment, 5G, the saturation of it is still so low that we're not seeing it being well used. And as we increase the usage of it, we will start to see more devices using it as well that go beyond just, can I play a game with my 5G network? And suddenly everyone's phones, everyone's doorbells and everything else, we start seeing everything, the mobile, the cars, all of the other things that start attaching to the network, and suddenly we're back in an oversubscription problem. And so at the moment, we have a pipe that gives you 1 gigabit because you're the only one person on it. And as soon as we start oversubscribing it, we're back to where we were. So I think that I'm kind of a little bit reticent with 5G at the moment, because even in the places I've found it, it's very exceptional when I find a performance that gives me, I completely agree with Phil that the performance is Wi-Fi when you find it, but it's rare and not enough devices are testing it yet. And I don't know where that tipping point is going to come. And for me, it feels like we're a long way away, just because we need so many more towers and so much more infrastructure to truly support that kind of seamless version of 5G that allows me to sit on a train or sit on a bus. I mean, I can go from here on the outskirts of London into London, and I lose my phone signal half a dozen times. I don't see 5G fixing that problem anytime soon, unfortunately.
I completely agree, and I think as the rollout progresses, as Bruce said, there's going to be so much competing on it that, this dream of having endless bandwidth that we can use for streaming, for cloud gaming is an illusion, because we're going to have our smart cities, our autonomous cars that are transmitting, and there's just so much stuff competing for that bandwidth that we still have to address the issue of bringing down the bandwidth the right way and not just assuming that we have endless bandwidth to use.
Well, I mean, there's an interesting, there's an interesting corollary to this, is that if we assume that there's going to be at least much more bandwidth, much more digital twins, much more devices, and we've had mobility, and mobility I think is a strong driver for streaming, because it's particularly games, because there's a lot of phones out there, and the people who have games on phones make a lot of money in some places, right? But why isn't it that we don't? And when you look at the younger generation, they're mostly mobile. I mean, I've worked on a project with a music artist and his manager. I don't think they ever used a computer. I mean, they used to do spreadsheets on their phones. They used to do their accounting. Everything was done on the phone. Everything was done on the move. So what I wanted to understand was, do you think that this is going to be continuing, or are we going to see some sort of situation, because we're seeing it already with social, where people are kind of saying, I want to cut off my, I don't want to be sitting there all the time with my phone and everything else, that people will sort of back off a little bit, that there's some sort of, even with streaming services, there's a lot of streaming services to choose from. It's actually almost as expensive as cable used to be, right? So do you see a point where, there could be, is this something that's going to evolve, or is there a faddish period that we have to go through? Maybe, we can start off with Wanda on this one, because she has a little bit of insight into the market.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in the early stages of a lot of this, so it is going to take a few years. I think it's not this like trajectory that's going to just be like straight up. These things take a lot of time. You know, it's 10 year out, you know, at least 5+ years out. And for game developers specifically, you know, they're all looking at emerging markets like India and Africa, and those markets have very big limitations. So entering them, just even from a standpoint in-app purchases, that in itself is something that they're still struggling with. So to add then on top of it, like 4G, 5G, and where we're going with that is just a whole other thing that they really can't even think about a lot of, because they're just trying to get, you know, in-app purchases working in some of these places.
Well, I think that leads to, we're kind of probably going to get to winding down a little bit, but I would kind of like to know exactly what you would like to see, and maybe everyone can take one shot at it, is what you think is really important. Either what you think is really important in streaming and cloud gaming and cloud entertainment and cloud play, one thing that you'd really like to see from a personal point of view happen, or one part of it that you think is going to translate into, you know, the enterprise or the business world as well, that some of these technologies are going to find uses outside of just play, that they could be useful in the business sense as well. If you have any opinions. Maybe Phil first, and then we'll just go through everything.
You know, what leaps to mind with that setup for me is something that Bruce touched on, which is kind of the metaverse applications, right? So these kind of next generation of games that are designed for the cloud offer more social ability, more people in the game, more immersive with avatars and things, more transportable between worlds. And that definitely directly does translate over into the business world, where people want to do conferences and stuff like this, where you can actually, you know, include all the people in this call in one room and everybody can interact. And so we see, you know, something that Nvidia's put out there is our Omniverse platform as being a way for primarily businesses actually to develop digital twins and metaverses for their products. That a lot of businesses are going to want to move that way, but those same types of technologies can be used by games and leverage the same kind of cloud infrastructure so that it can be made, you know, for people in all kinds of remote locations, and I think make things much more inclusive. Even the things like Teams video conferencing or Zoom video conferencing one day can be a lot more 3D oriented and more interactive for people.
Bruce, is there anything that you see from the blockchain and the Web3 on the gaming side that translates into the business world?
Yeah, and I think it's all of the Web3 pieces. I think it is, I mean, we just talked about sort of what the experiences will be. We talked a lot over the last couple of years about the amazing concerts inside things like Fortnite and Roblox. Well, I want to be able to give everyone a ticket, and I want that ticket, maybe that ticket's an NFT, but I can give that ticket and now you can just jump into that experience. You don't have to be a Roblox player or a Fortnite player. It's where you take your friends, it's where you invite people, it's accessible, it's instant. There's more people there, we can hang out, we can socialize. That's us moving towards these next generation of metaverse experiences, which I also think touches on what you were saying. It's not about being online streaming all the time. It's how do I make things accessible and instant when I want to go to them? And I think that's key for what it is we're developing. And then I think the crossover for enterprise, which is something we've all touched on here. And I think Phil just mentioned Omniverse and Wanda mentioned tooling. And I know that Beamr and myself are very focused on low bandwidth streaming, low latency streaming. It's the tooling. It's how do you build this stuff and how do you make it easier? Because it's still really hard to put things in the cloud. And so if I say I want to build a games platform, Netflix is off to build a games platform, right? We've seen this before. Phil knows how hard this is, right? We've all lived this. So this is hard for someone to just pop something up into the cloud. And I think the thing that will be key is building that infrastructure and tooling that makes it easier for people to develop content and then just put it in the cloud as easily as they do today with something like Unreal or Unity. Build a game, release it into a store. How do I build a game and release it into the metaverse or the cloud or wherever we want to put it? And that's where that crossover will be so important, along with all of the supporting technology, the digital twins, the open spaces, the gigapixel cameras picking everything up, all of that. So it's the back end will be where the big crossover is. We build things on game technology for enterprise now.
That's maybe I don't know if you have an opinion on this, Tamar, but what do you think about the back end infrastructure and what the cloud service providers can do? Or are they doing enough? Are they aware of it?
I think, I mean, obviously Philip and Bruce made excellent points on the future and the metaverse and the ease of experience, the ease of use, and I know firsthand amazing things that Philip and his team are working on. But I want to throw it in a slightly different direction of the future, and I think that's the contention between, on the one hand, having these amazing experiences and anyone can bring this game and make ultra definition and the HDR quality 12-bit all our dreams come true on the one hand. And I think Bruce is smiling because more so in Europe than in the US, there is rising awareness for what's called greening of streaming, an initiative led by Tom Robinson and others. But it's making its way across the ocean as well. And I mean, while on the one hand, we're talking about metaverse and 3D and immersive experience and everything on the possible, and 8K monitors and going to the codecs, as I mentioned before, that enable all of this experience. And on the other hand, recently a term was coined of Earth resolution, which is going back to 720p of all things in order to be more eco-friendly. So I think there's some contention here between, on the one hand, wanting to, get 5G everywhere and have these immersive, amazing experiences. And on the other hand, becoming very aware of the carbon footprint, of what this means, and our responsibility to use this technology wisely rather than blindly.
That's great. Does anybody else have anything to add on that topic? Okay, so I'd like to just finish it off with just one thing. Maybe Wanda, you can give your perspective on this. We've talked a lot about it's going to take time to get there, and we've talked about what the challenges are in terms of going forward. But do you see that, in your opinion, is the game industry fully on board with the notion of cloud gaming?
It's a good question. I think there are certain pockets that are, and others that are, holding back. It really depends on each individual developer, honestly. Whether they're AAA or mobile, what region they're in. I think all of that kind of impacts their decision on whether they're going to do cloud gaming or not. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's an easy thing to answer, because every company has its own opinion on it. You're on mute.
Fantastic. So, poor Omid, you're on mute again. What? How'd you do that?
Trying to get off mute.
Well, this turned out, Omid, congratulations. I think this panel turned out fantastic. And we just have one more panel to go, but it's really amazing to see this wonderful collection of people, including our moderator, in one place. I don't think this isn't something you'd see elsewhere. I'm certain of it.